meeting to order so we can get going. We know we have tourism and they have a lot of people who want to come and be starting on time. So, can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting, please? Thank you, Supervisor Loeb on the motion and Supervisor McDevitt on the second. And I will turn it over to you, Nancy.
Okay. So right off the get-go here, we're going to start with an update on the Chestertown and Queensbury environmental properties that I've been working on. The Chestertown one looks pretty good with the state of New York. They are asked if the county would be interested in working through an order on the Pine Street property, and I let her know that I felt we would. So I did send her an email this morning real quick just to ask her where that was going, because she had stated that they would get estimates for the cost, and they would need those estimates before they went into that consent order with us to do the cleanup on the property. And she said that she was going to check with her staff this morning to see if they had come up with anything yet. So she should be getting back to me. So they were looking kind of at a spring time frame on that anyways, once all the yuck was gone. So that's where that is. The Bay Road property. The state of New York, they say that there doesn't appear to be a petroleum issue or a historic UST at the site.
Underground storage tank.
Correct. Sorry, thank you. They don't seem like they want to move forward with any of the cleanup on the Bay Road property. So we've had some emails being exchanged amongst some of us, Supervisor Stroud being one of them, Claudia, the attorney, and Ryan. So we are trying to figure out the best way to go forward with this, and there is some concern about possible asbestos being at the site. So we're looking at trying to get estimates on what it would cost to have somebody go in there and either one, if there is asbestos, tear it down, or to have somebody look at it and see if there is asbestos. I know Dave Hatton had reached out to, which is the town code enforcement. He had reached out to Ellsworth Construction for an estimate, so he is waiting on a quote from them. I also reached out to Kevin Hajos to see if he could reach out to Clark Patterson Lee, who they have on contract, to see if they could give us a cost of what it would cost for them to go and do an estimate to see about asbestos contamination. If there is, I've also discussed with our county attorney to see if we could use the reserve testing fund to help with the cost of the asbestos, or the estimate as well. And I can defer to Mary on that, but I believe she had reviewed it and thought that we could use those funds for an asbestos inspection. So if we have that and we know, then we'll have an even better idea of what it'll cost to go in and tear the building down or to do demolition. But we really won't be able to determine that until we know if there's asbestos there or not. So it's kind of where we're at right now.
Can you give us an update on Mike Swan's recommendation regarding the foreclosure?
Sure I can. Mike had suggested putting the property back in the foreclosure. And again, we can still, even if it's in the foreclosure, at least this way, if they're in the foreclosure, because it wasn't just this one, we also put the Chestertown property back in the foreclosure. The Chestertown one, if that's in and we get this cleanup done in the spring, we'll be able to move forward with it going through the foreclosure. I believe the town of Chester is interested in that property. They would eventually, when it gets closer, if we keep it in, they would write us a letter, letting us know. They'd pass a resolution at their town to move forward with purchasing the property from us. However, with this one here, Mike, reason for putting it in is to keep it moving along. This way, if it stays in the foreclosure and we get the cleanup done, we could at that time, we'll take title, we could turn it over to the town if the town was interested in the whole process. I don't know if I really want to get into all that right now, but the town, you know, we've discussed anyways, possibly making it a parking lot, the Bay Road one, for the bike path. So I don't know at this point who would end up being the owner, if it would be the County of Warren or the Town of Queensbury. We haven't really moved forward with that, but that's Mike's reasoning for putting it in the foreclosure, to keep that process moving so that if we can get the work done, it'll still stay in, and then we would take title to it and be able to do what we needed to do with it at that time.
Well, I thought, Lexi, my understanding was that we couldn't do the work until we took ownership of it. The only entity that could is the town of Queensbury to do the demolition.
Correct. The town of Queensbury could always work with the Department of Health and condemn it and do the demolition.
Mm-hmm.
The county, with the temporary incidence of ownership, we can't go on. That's all we have is a temporary incidence of ownership so that we can do all this testing. The building would have to be condemned in order to be demoed, unless the owner chose to go in and do the demolition themselves, which I don't foresee that happening.
No, it's
Supervisor
in the
Stroud.
foreclosure process, so, thank you, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the county could end up with ownership of it as well, and then whoever owns it, that can demolish it.
Right, but usually
I mean, previous to ownership, you could theoretically condemn it and start demolishing it as well. So it all depends.
Well, I think we want to get some quotes and then talk to Queensbury and see where we are. Yes, Supervisor Hogan.
I have a couple questions, very quickly. Queensbury working with the Department of Health to condemn it doesn't necessarily mean they're taking ownership of it, right?
Correct.
Okay. The other thought is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the wording from the DEC was a little weird on the soil. So if we're going in there for asbestos testing, do we, and ultimately looking at it as a county-owned property or even a town-owned property, do we want to, whomever's going to be in there doing that testing, to also do some soil testing and find out a little bit more about what we're looking at there?
Well, we've had the soil and water testing done.
Done all the testing that has been...
Done that already, so I don't think we would be doing any more
There's
down
nothing
that
further
road.
to clarify, because that letter from DEC was a little odd.
Well, we have a
was.
full
Yes,
report.
Supervisor Stroud.
Well, you mean the letter that said there's contamination, but there's really no contamination?
Yeah, that letter.
Yeah, that one.
Supervisor McGowan.
If we're looking at it, should we,
Yeah.
maybe clarify that?
Well,
We tried. Lexi tried to get clarification from them, and basically they're saying, yes, there's contamination there, but it's not warranted. They aren't, in their eyes, it's not warranted for them to come into an agreement with us to help us do the cleanup.
But we're looking at,
So it's either on us to do the cleanup, or no one does the cleanup.
not,
Yes, Supervisor.
not clear as what needs to be cleaned up. DEC's been very
Right.
vague.
Their last response was the second site at Bay Road, based on the information we have been given, which were all the test results. The first one was Clark Patterson Lee's, the second one was ATL. They say, information we have been given from samples, there doesn't appear to be a petroleum issue or a historic UST at the site. So they don't really want to get involved with digging it up. They're just considering it dirty dirt. And to them, dirty dirt is just dirty dirt. If there is a developer that comes in and that is interested in it, the words from Russell Hike were, they're going to look at that report and it's going to be no big deal. They're just going to dispose, they'll come up with a plan, they'll work with DEC, and they'll dispose of the dirty dirt as needed.
but we're looking at keeping it and inviting the public to use it.
Correct. But you could also, if we do that, we would be making it a parking lot and we'd be paving it, so you would encapsulate any of that dirty dirt.
Okay, Supervisor McGowan.
Hear it now?
Yes.
This is the second parcel that we've come across. There was one on Cooper Street that he owned. I'm not quite sure who tore that one down. I know it was in quite disrepair, and Glens Falls was after them for the longest time. And now it's going to be a apartment project, I believe. I think Glens Falls approved for. So, you know, how did you get that one torn down? I guess my question is that I'm kind of familiar with the owners, and what's the recourse that we can go after to recoup some of this? You know, they're just walking away and leaving a mess for the second time, and you know, and what do we have? What can we do legally to, you know, go after the estate? So I know he's, you know, Mr. Mullins passed away, but I mean, there's got to be something that we can to recoup some of our money.
Do you want to address that, or maybe our county attorney?
I would defer it to our county attorney, for that. I don't know if we could legally go after her estate. We may.
Whose estate?
Or David Mullins' estate. His wife is still alive.
Oh, for the
and
cleanup?
children.
And the son, I mean, like I said, there was two businesses, you know what I'm saying, one in Glens Falls on Cooper Street and then one on Bay. And both were, you know, just milked dry. He never invested anything back into them. You know, and now they're just arrayed, and like I said, I don't know how Glens Falls got that building torn down over on Cooper Street, but it looks so much better.
We can ask Mary to look into it and give us some more guidance.
I would like to see what we can do to recoup, because it's just a shame.
Supervisor Dickinson?
I think you missed the point here. They're walking away from it because they don't want to put the money into it. It still has some value. We, the county, would get it without any charge. They're not charging us. And then whatever we spend on it only increases the value of the property. We've done very well with a number of these, cleaning them up and turning them over and actually making money.
Yes, I hear you. Don't we have the figure, though, on the back taxes for that property?
I want to say they owe us over $200,000 in back taxes.
So it's not like we're getting it for free. We're getting it for minus $200,000.
Well, no, you can't look at it that way.
Plus, we
All right,
really
we
don't know what
still
to
have
do.
some more work to do on that one. I wanna move forward, though, and I'm gonna skip over the next one, the National Grid property, okay? And then, go right into the discussion of our countywide septic law, because I know there are some people in the public who came to listen and hear what we're doing with that. And I'm going to throw Supervisor Strout kind of under the bus, if you don't mind. I didn't really give him a heads up on this, but we did include the Queensbury Town Code that they passed in the fall, and I was hoping you could just give us a little overview of what it entails, what it would require from property owners, and then we can talk about whether we have any consensus here to move forward at the county level.
Well, okay, certainly. The title of the law that we developed, and took over 2 years developing, was septic inspection upon property transfer. So, and this only applies to our waterfront properties because we wanted to test the water. So, if you have a residence in waterfront residential property, which surrounds most of your major water bodies in the town of Queensbury, Glen Lake, Sunnyside, Hudson River, certainly Lake George, you have to have your septic system inspected. And if it's during the winter and you're going to make a property transfer, you have to put $2,000 aside that you'll get back once if the septic system proves, non-inspectable. And when we inspect it in the spring, if it passes, fine. If it doesn't pass, you have to still get it repaired. But it's to try and make sure that septic systems are functioning properly. And that's it. So people have said, I don't need to have my system inspected. Well, do you know that it's functioning properly? No! But this is to assure, especially environmentally sensitive areas like shoreline properties, to make sure that the septic systems do get inspected. because, as we all know, one of the major contributors to our water quality pollution is septic systems. They're on-site septic systems. So, and it contributes, and Chris Novitsky's here, and he could point out a whole lot more than I do, but the phosphorus, the nitrogen, E. coli, even today's article in the Post-Star points out that, you're reading levels of chlorine, which is not a natural substance in waters, is suggesting that there's leaking septic systems. So Glen Lake, which, looks like a beautiful lake, and is a beautiful lake, is getting chlorine levels, which means there are likely failing septic systems. Well, the one time we can capture that is upon property transfer. We can have that septic system inspected. And that will include, among other things, opening up the septic tank, inspecting that for its integrity, and the D-box. And the D-box is a buried telltale, and usually only buried a couple feet below the surface. And that tells you a lot about how healthy that septic system is. So you see the law here, but besides the law, and I've sent this to some of you, is what we will actually expect for, what the owner should expect, and the forms that have gone with that. So we have everything besides the law. We have the forms and the whole inspection process. So our people at the town of Queensbury are getting trained to do the inspection. You need to have the training to do the inspection. And one reason why we decided not to do town-wide septic inspections is because we wanted to try this out, see how long it takes, and see how the process is going. So that's why we targeted waterfront residential to start with. Because you can make the argument that all septic systems should be inspected, but since we're doing this in-house, we're just doing waterfront residential for now.
Supervisor Stroud, can I ask Chris Novitsky to give us a little
Yeah.
info too? Yep. Chris, do you mind going up to the podium, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor, and good morning, all supervisors. Chris Novitsky, Lake George Waterkeeper. I just wanted to give a brief talk about some of the projects that we've been involved with, and to give you some background, which I think will be useful as you consider moving forward on this initiative. We're fortunate enough to work with two of the supervisors at the table, Supervisor Stroud and Supervisor Dickinson, on two separate projects, but the numbers that come out and the data are very similar regarding septic systems. We worked with the town of Queensbury on the drafting of their said transfer law, but in the Dunham's Bay area on Lake George, we worked with them to set up a wastewater management district, which was a voluntary program to set up replacements and inspections of systems in that district. About 72 properties thereabout, John, I think it was.
Yeah.
And to monitor that, we actually, well, before we set that up, there was a study of the septic systems in that district. And basically about 25% of those were up-to-date, permitted. The majority of those, about 40%, were no information at all. People did not know what there was there. And the remainder, well, we kind of think our septic tank's over here, and that's about all we know. So it's basically about a third, a third, a third. They set up the district. Our organization, the Fund for Lake George, provided money to assist in the replacement of systems. And we've used algae. That's what we focused on, is algae, to test the water quality, because algae is separate from water samples, because the dilution in Lake George and that can occur, and with all the wave action, algae is on the rocks and live there, and if there was, what we found is an indice based on organic pollution, which comes from human waste, there's particular species that will grow on the rocks. So we actually took the samples, went back and analyzed those, and if there's particular species of concern, there's about 10 that are on an indice. If you see them, you get a score, and that tells you there's probable, high probability of organic pollution. We found a number of those areas in Dunham's Bay. When the septic systems have been replaced, and they've replaced about 20% over the past 4 years, we've gone back and sampled, and we've seen a decrease in those algae species. So in our view, this is showing that the septic system replacement is beneficial. Move over, we just finished a study with the town of Lake George, a septic initiative program, and I'll leave this with the chair, and you can share that or go to our website to take a look. But some of the information, we analyzed all septic systems within 500 feet of Lake George and 100 feet of streams tributary to the lake. So it was over 400 systems, and the numbers are very similar. The inventory showed that, now, expected life expectancy is about 30 to 40 years for a septic system. We found that a third of the systems we analyzed were underneath or within that life expectancy. A third were about that life expectancy or exceeded, and a third people had no idea. So again, that's that kind of similar one-third, one-third, one-third that we found in Queensbury, but in a much larger data set. We also found that over 50% of the homeowners were not maintaining their septic systems, pumping them out, or had no idea if they ever were maintained. We found about 1/5 of the septic systems were undersized, the septic tanks were undersized, so therefore there's not enough volume to retain, and you get the transfer of solids into the fields lead to premature failing. And again, 1/3 of the systems are of unknown size or unknown construction. So again, I think very similar to what we found in Queensbury, but with this type of data, you can start building up the data that supports you to make these type of decisions. We also use this to base because the town's like, well, how do we manage this system and all these systems, and where do we know where to prioritize? Well, we actually developed a prioritization system based on GIS. So we took site suitability, what was important for a system to work, depth to bedrock, depth to groundwater, the soil information, how fast it perked, how slow it perked, and we created a rating system. Then we evaluated all the systems, as I said, and created a rating system on the age of the systems, the components, were they compliant, and then were they maintained, and created a second database with that. And the third was our algae samples. So we went along the entire shoreline of the town, took samples over 2 summers, and then that was our third data set. And then we came up with a prioritization of 10 areas in the town that you've got all these shoreline properties. Where do you focus? Well, based on science and based on engineering principles and based on water quality samples, we were able to present that to the town and say these are areas that we feel you should focus on. So we've got a summary of that. I'll share that with the commission or with the supervisors, and I'll leave a copy of this report. We also have copies of these maps in this report. I think they're also up on the town's website as well. So with that, I'll take any
great.
questions, or if either of the supervisors that we worked with, would like to add anything.
I would like to ask Tammy DiLorenzo to come up and talk about another initiative that we have also in the works.
Okay. To piggyback on that, so New York State has a septic system replacement program. It's run through the DEC, but the funding is through the Environmental Facilities Corporation. So we were asked to look into that. And basically where that funding is coming from, there's a first round of $15 million. DEC identified 31 counties, identified water bodies of concern in 31 counties in New York State. Warren County was not one of those 31 counties. So the first round of funding, the $15 million, will go to those high-need counties, the high-need water bodies. So I was asked to look into, well, where does that leave Warren County? So there will be an opportunity to opt into the program. I've spoken with Ken Kaczynski, he's with the DEC, and basically he said the bar is set pretty high, identify the water bodies of concern. But what he did say, I spoke with him this week, and what he did say is there's no timeline set for 2019 to date. A high-level, just what Chris was speaking of, a high-level GIS study with a letter of recommendation from our Department of Health, which would be our Department of Health in Glens Falls. I've spoken with Anita Gabalski from the Department of Health, and she is going to work with Ken Kaczynski to actually find out what should be included in that letter of support for that. But I'm really interested in getting that information that you have, because what the point that Ken was making is a lot of the upstate counties are receiving funding in about block grants of about $200,000. What the program does is it'll allow reimbursement up to 50% of cost, up to a total of $10,000 per project. So again, if you take the $200,000 divided by 10,
Is that I'm sorry, is that for an individual's wastewater
Yes.
system? Okay, thanks.
Yes. So again, if you take the 200,000 divided by the 10, we're talking about 20 projects. So what he has advised is being very careful on identifying where this money is going to make the best impact. So if we identified 40 water bodies or 20 water bodies and did one project, the impact is not going to be high. So that's kind of where we're at with that. So it's very interesting to hear that a lot of it sounds like a lot of the groundwork has been done for us, and that's where that project is at.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I think that's important to have that dovetail with this discussion, because people are going to want to know how are we going to fund some of the projects. Supervisor Dickinson, did you want to add something?
How'd you guess? We're very pleased with our sewer initiative. It's been going on about 4 years, I would guess. We did get a grant a couple years ago that gave us this report that Chris has talked about. We partnered with the waterkeeper, Chris, and the fund to have them do the grant for us. We've worked very closely together to do this. The key to our sewer initiative is that it is a cooperative program. We are not saying thou shalt do your septic system. What we're saying is, if you want to do it, and you're in our initial zone of concern, that we would have funds available to offset a portion of that cost up to 50%. We have a waiting list, people that want to do this, with 400 potential clients. It's going to take a while to get through that list. I think as it goes along, people realize the value of it and the success of it, more and more people will volunteer because they know. One of the attributes is we've had one property do it on their own. Very small piece. It was on the little brook, Smith Brook, in Diamond Point, which goes directly into the lake. The house covered most of the property, a small house. They did this project, they put in a double tertiary treatment system, they got it approved, they put the system in, sold the property immediately. The buyer stayed there for a summer. In the fall, he resold it for more than he paid for it. The value in doing this is your property is much more valuable and much more saleable. And again, it's a volunteer program. I have resisted Chris's attempts and the LGA's attempts to get the town of Lake George to do this transfer law thing. I'm not interested in doing it. I don't want Lake George to be involved in doing it. We have a volunteer program that I hope gives us the same results. We're going to be able to replace a lot of systems and improve the environment around the lake. So I'm a no vote.
Supervisor Simpson, then I'll come to you, McDevitt.
Well, you know, with 400 places on a waiting list, that doesn't sound very encouraging for the water quality.
Yeah.
I mean, as a supervisor of a town that pays that's, you know, the tag between the people on our lakes, on the lakefront of our lake, and what the town taxpayers pay to maintain the water quality that we have, we're gonna have a problem if we don't.
No. What we're hampered by...
Our costs aren't going down.
No. What we were hampered, in the beginning, no one wanted to get involved in this proposal. No one. They wouldn't give us grant money because we were making improvements on private property. I argued you do it all the time with the federal housing program you have. You want private property, you build them a new home, give it to them. I said, it's no different. So in the beginning, I pounded on a lot of doors. I went to everybody. Nowhere. Nothing. And then finally, I was crying in my soup to Chris and the fund, and they said, we'll fund it. So they came up with funds to fund it, and the program started to move, started to get a life of its own. And immediately we got this grant, which stopped the project for 2 years while we did all this background information, which is really the proper way to do it. And now we're there, we're ready to rock and roll. I think what's going to happen here, and I'm really hopeful, is the number of systems we replace in any given period of time depends on how much money we have. And I think this has created a lot of interest in Albany, this program. Part of our requirements with this fund and this program is an educational one, to go around the lake and try to get other people involved in the same program. So it's moving. If they came and gave us $1 million, we'd do the 400 systems and fast as we could do them.
Supervisor
And
McDevitt.
you're not a single entity. Everybody can get their own contractors. You could do all 400 in one summer.
I'm very hesitant to ask the following question because I don't think there's enough time today, but it seems like this is what we're leading to, you know, should we or should we not have a countywide enforcement mechanism to ensure clean waters in our area? So that seems to be the question, and 400 properties, Dennis, it would, I mean, there should be an objective criteria in terms of getting a specific handle on those properties. I mean, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? Not 40 years or 50 years.
We have, right now, Peter, we have $30,000 in matching funds from the fund. And we're estimating that'll probably get us 4, maybe 5 systems. We're also hoping that as soon as we start those, and people are aware of them, that it will start to accelerate.
Supervisor Stroh.
To answer your other question, I mean, to be concerned about water quality as a county is very apparent by our building inspection program. Well, that was a major coup. On the other hand, there are times when you need to rely on the supervisors in the individual towns. John and I obviously have stepped to the plate. I've had a number of conversations with Edna. They have a sewage system up there in Edna, and they're also concerned about those that are not in it. The supervisor of Fort Ann, we've had conversations with him.
No, I commend both of you. I mean, that's the direction we want to go. It seems like, you know, specifically Queensbury, I mean, the fact that you guys actually have put in place a mechanism to ensure clean waters. I mean, how do you argue with that at the end of the day?
Supervisor Stroh.
Well, it's time for all hands on deck. I mean, we see the water quality of the southern basin of Lake George deteriorating. And And so Queensbury, what Lake George is doing is excellent. As a matter of fact, Queensbury is going to join Lake George in this effort. And Dan is helping, and Dennis is putting together. This is an excellent program they put together. So we've secured Kathy Bozzoni, and Chris Nowinski is working with Kathy Bozzoni to develop a data system for the 14 miles of coastline that Queensbury has on Lake George. And I think there's, I forget how many residences, but there's hundreds of residences that are all located along there. And we're coming up with the same thing that Chris Nowinski and Dennis has come up with. So we want to put together a database, and then with the program they've done with this matrix of depth to groundwater, soil characteristics, steepness of terrain as going into lake, all those go into a matrix. That's an excellent system that they worked out. We're going to join them in that effort. So the southern basin of Lake George will be largely covered between Queensbury and Lake George, and we hope others, as Bolton Landing has always been very progressive in this effort, to work together on this. Now, while that's happening, in parallel with that, Queensbury has formed the first septic district on Lake George, which has proved very effective, and we've worked with the Fund for Lake George on that matter, and they've proven to be very helpful. And and we have the property transfer law. So we're trying to get this from all possible angles that we can. And and again, like I said, the program that Lake George is works, and you know, none of us is doing this alone. I mean, with the Lake George Association, with the Fund for Lake George, with the Lake George Land Conservancy, with the Lake George Park Commission, and the various municipalities, we've all been working together. I mean, so a subtle difference is Lake George doesn't think the property transfer law is worth the effort to go there. All right, well, I might disagree with that, but in the bigger picture, we're all working together.
Hold on, Dennis. Supervisor Hogan, do you have any comments at this time? Okay. Jean?
I have no comment.
Okay. Supervisor Dickinson?
I'm disappointed, Gene.
You know, the basin, well, I'll make a comment. Don't
Yes,
give me one of my
thanks.
comments. The basin does a great job, Lake George. But the little towns, like Lake Luzerne, we can't even get a snowplow from you guys, because we're not in the district, or we're not in the basin. So, you know, I've tried. I had Lake Luzerne, I had a grant for $100,000 about 7 years ago to look at 122 properties around Lake George, Lake Luzerne. 4 people applied. The rest of them say, keep off my property. Well, we don't have the big conglomerate, like all these funds and all these groups to work and go after these people. So it's you know, we get put aside as a little town, you know, not in the clique of the basin.
You need the transfer law.
Hold on, Dennis. I know we're going to get in trouble because tourism is coming on.
Tourism coming up.
You asked my comment.
I did. Thank you. All right, I will give you a chance to make one more comment, but then I think that I think it's worthwhile to bring this back to committee because there's still some discussion to be had and some consideration, even if we're just gathering data on the prioritization zones and making sure that we're including people who are not necessarily in the Lake George Basin, because from what I understand, the state program can cover other water bodies throughout the county, not just Lake George or not just Glen Lake. So I think that, you know, we don't need to take any action today, but I would like to bring this back to a future committee meeting unless people are totally, okay. All right, Dennis, you can have the final say. Sorry, Supervisor Wild.
I just want to make a point that Chris reminded me of Peter. We have like 467 units that we're looking at. A good portion of them have modern updated septic systems. So we're not doing all 450 or whatever. You know, a lot of people have upgraded and know what they have.
Okay, then I have to let Supervisor Wild too. Go ahead, Stroud. Supervisor Stroud.
The other thing that is in this mix is, I think we have about 700, but the part of ours is the density on our peninsulas. Cleverdale, Rockford, especially problematic. We're working with, again, all the groups of Lake George and trying to develop community septic systems for those peninsulas. we're focusing on Rockhurst, we'd like Cloverdale to join in, and we're looking at developing a community. Well, all those individual systems, many of which are linking into the lake and polluting it, would now go to an enhanced treatment facility and negate almost all pollution going to Lake George from those septic systems by forming a community septic system. That's also in the mix. So we're coming at this from all different angles. Thank you.
Okay, Supervisor Wild.
I just really quickly, we're trying to affect change, and I'm wondering, this is public data that we have. What if we publish this data? Because I'm thinking peer pressure might have something to do with affecting this change, because a neighbor adjacent to someone that has a system that's failed is going to worry about their property values decreasing. So why don't we just, it is public data, why don't we publish it, see what happens?
Yeah. I would, thank you, Supervisor Wild. I would be remiss if I didn't allow the public to speak, so Jane, do you want to say something?
I just want to say quickly that we're talking about lakes and lake systems, but I want everybody to keep in mind it's all about watersheds, and we all live in a watershed where eventually all of this goes and comes from.
Good job.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public?
I just applied, live on the Hudson.
Okay. All right, I think this is a very important issue, and we will definitely bring this back. Okay, motion to adjourn, please. Supervisor Simpson, second by Supervisor Hogan. Thank you.